You're welcome to follow along, but this is more of a informational sort of demo. Hi, good morning. Informational sort of demo for today. Let me make sure my attendance is all good. While we're doing that, just really quick at the top of the order, I want to talk about how when I explained to you guys the purpose of 6.3 or the kind of the objective of project 6.3, I did not do a very good job for your class, but I have two of these tabs open. For sixth period, it went a lot better, a lot more clearly. So I've linked the section of their Zoom room to explaining 6.3 if it doesn't make sense still, or you're a little bit confused, that is totally fine. I did not do a very good job of explaining it to your class, so you have a video available here that shows it in more detail and a little bit more visual of what I'm looking for, if that's something that interests you. So today we're talking about the gradient tool in Illustrator. The word gradient means like a gradual change from one color to another or one amount of lightness to another. And that's going to add value to your scenes. And the value, remember, is the description or the definition, I mean, of lightness to darkness to create a sense of depth, to create a sense of interest, and to make your scene really start to sort of come alive with the lighting effects. So I'm here in my version of 6.3, the PDF that I saved for sixth period, because I'm just going to give you a demo similarly to the pen tool about how the gradient tool works and how you can customize it in a variety of different ways. Gradients need Gradients need, dang, it's already gradiized. I don't want it to be gradiized. There we go. Gradients need some type of shape to attach to. So we'll do a square, we'll do a circle, and let's do a star. Just feeling crazy. Okay. So I got three shapes here. Let's pull them off of the artboard so you can see their color. The gradient tool is very customizable and a very interesting tool that creates some cool effects when we combine it with texture tomorrow. And you can combine these three things together the week after break to really turn your scene from a flat design to something really comprehensive and really interesting. So the gradient tool lives right here. It's kind of this like frosty looking little tool like this. And you can see in the tooltip example how it can take something from a flat color to something a lot more interesting with just a couple of clicks. So when you enable the gradient tool, which is right above the eyedropper tool, and you click and drag across a shape, it has to be a closed path in order for this to work really well. When you do that, if I drag across, it's supposed to, there we go. Okay, apparently I have to double click. There we go. Once I click on this square with my gradient tool enabled, it's going to create this graph basically from lightness to darkness because it goes from white to black. The only thing a gradient does is transition from one color to another. But you'll notice if I click on it, it's just a normal square that now has a fill of a gradient as compared to a solid color like we're used to. So if I double click on my color picker, it's just going to tell me that this is black. The way that you edit a gradient is by clicking on something that has a gradient fill, like this one, with the tool that you started with. And that's going to give us this bar right here. This bar allows you to adjust how the gradient's relationship from light to dark is by sliding this middle slider. So if you put the middle slider all the way to one end, it's going to have mostly white, and it's going to transition between white to black in a very short distance, or vice versa. It's going to have very little white, a lot more of the black color. A lot more of the black color here because this sets the midpoint. It's by default in the middle right here, so that you have an even relationship from one color to the next. Now what yours might do when you do this is it'll pop open this gradient panel right here, this window. There's two ways that you can customize your gradients. There's two ways that you can adjust the variety of colors, and that's going to be on the gradient bar itself or in the gradient window that is right here if you're in Essentials Classic. And if you can't see it, remember you can go to Window and pop open Gradients right there so that you can adjust it this way. And you can set each of these full circles as different fill colors. You see when I click on them, the fill box right here just changes from solid white to solid black because that is the default gradient colorway. So if I make this, let's do a complementary pair. I like orange and blue. So let's do orange on this side, and let's do blue on this side. Or wait, sorry, I had them backwards. Orange on, or blue on the left, orange on the right. And it'll create this really interesting sort of like sunset or kind of very visually appealing color fill. And all I had to do was a couple clicks. And it's gonna make something that's a lot more visually, you're a lot more visually invested in, right? You can add more colors along the way, as well as adjust the gradient on this panel over here. It's the same bar, it's a little bit easier to use. You don't have to have the gradient tool enabled. But you can adjust how the gradient appears, as well as adjusting how much of the gradient is actually grading, gradually changing. You can hear me say the gra sound a lot today. So like if I put these two circles really close to one another, and still maintain that midpoint in between them, you can see it has a very short distance of transition as compared to this much longer, much smoother, much prettier relationship from one side to the other. You can do more than edit the colors on your gradient. You can add more colors by clicking. You see how if I hover over the color part of my gradient window, it's just a regular mouse cursor. But if I pull it down just a little bit, it turns into this triangle with a plus. When you see that triangle with the plus, you can add more stops on your gradient, and that's going to get you more colors that you can work with. So let's do, on this side, let's do a darker blue. You can double click on these circles, or you can take your gradient tool and click on this, the fill. So let's make this a little bit darker. Remember the top color is your new one that you're changing. The bottom color is the original one. Let's make this orange a little bit darker. We can do that by double clicking on the circle and reducing. We're in CMYK. We should be in RGB. Whoops. Let's just make this orange just a little bit darker, a little bit more burnt. And then let's make these ones a little brighter, because this is going to sample the color that's right here instead of the color that we started with. You see it's kind of this magenta and then kind of this coppery color. Or not magenta, excuse me, more violet. Let's make this a little bit more blue, a little bit lighter blue, or lighter purpley color. Let's make this orange a little less drab, a little bit more vibrant, like that. And now we have now we have more colors that we can work with. We can adjust the distance between the blue colors. We can adjust the distance. Oops, I added another one on accident. We can adjust the distance between the orange colors, and we can adjust the distance between the relationship of the two of them as well. It's very easy to really start creating some interesting color patterns. And if you stick with those complementary color harmonies, like we covered in Unit 5. Hi, good morning. Like we covered in Unit 5, you can really get some interesting results right off the bat without having to think about it too hard, which is a cool part about graphic design, especially with color. It gives you a really easy starting point that you can build off of. So there's ways that you can edit your gradients by clicking on this edit gradient button, and then you can rotate it. You can change the way that it's positioned by grabbing these endpoints like this, and it's going to snap back to the original size of the shape. So like if we were going to go corner to corner, oops, accidentally took that piece off. You can adjust the length of it by grabbing the very small black square at the end, kind of like an anchor point, and you can adjust the rotation of it with when your cursor turns into like this handle, or not this handle, this loop little icon type of thing like this. You keep accidentally removing no, I don't want to remove that. Zoom in. Let me move the length. There we go. Gradients, you typically want them to fill the entire shape because that gives you the most, there we go. It's very finicky sometimes. That gives you the most available color space to work with here. There's different types of gradients as well. This is a linear gradient. It's a straight line. There's also radial gradients, which are circular. You can see there's 3 different types of gradients up here. Linear, radial, and then we'll get to this one in a second called freeform. One thing to keep in mind about the gradient tool is once you set one, it's going to assume that you want that color every time, or that set of colors every time. If that's not true, you can take your gradient tool and start fresh with a regular black and white linear one, switch that to a radial one, and it's going to start creating, instead of going across the whole thing, it's just going to be the radius. You can make it go across the whole way if you would like, but this will create some interesting sort of like 3D effects, some sort of lens aspects. With the gradient tool enabled, you can also just click around the outside edge to make something like this. And then I'm gonna have this go, if it would, I lost it a little bit. There we go. I like mine to have sort of an angle like this, so it gives it that cool 3D fake fake lighting effect. Cool kind of Y2K, chromey sort of style. This is a great example of value, which is what the gradient tool really adds, because you can tell, even though this circle was flat 2 seconds ago, by just adding a little bit of lighting detail and a little bit of an angle, it becomes like it could be 3D. It appears like it could be a fully 3D shape. If I want to edit that gradient, I actually want to pull the white part a little bit closer and pull the midpoints a little bit further back so that it's not directly on the edge of my sphere and has a, it's got space to it. The last type of gradient that Illustrator has built in is the freeform gradient. So I'm just going to add a regular linear black and white. Oh, this is a radial one. Regular linear black and white gradient. You can see it's going to extend past the length of the star. But if I click on this freeform gradient, I have these points that I can move around. That's going to create a gradient based on the wherever the different colorful points are. And you can double click on these colors to change what those points are. Let's do a green and red sort of situation. I have done one, I did do one, what was it called? Maybe you've seen this before. This makes a really cool freeform gradient. So I'm gonna copy this image real quick and I'm gonna sample it directly in Illustrator. So on my freeform gradient, take my gradient tool once again. You can sample by clicking on one of these points and then taking your eyedropper tool. That did the whole thing. It's not what I wanted. Okay. Let's do it from the gradient panel. Let's see if that works better. So I want to double click on this. No, come on. Please work. Ow. It's not doing what I needed to. So let's just try to match this kind of cup design as best we can here. Maybe take this one, then we'll take our eyedropper tool. Okay. No, okay, it's being difficult, but you can gain inspiration from color harmonies like this one that you've seen in the design world. Let's get rid of the orange down here. You can also just hit backspace or delete on different points to change those or get rid of them entirely. If we make that point black and that point white, we can kind of see how the freeform gradient works. You just move these individual points around and it's going to create that visual gradient such as this. So gradient tool is one that's going to add a lot of value in the artistic sense to your scenes because you have the relationship from shadow to light. And it's going to create some cool color combos, cool color harmonies, and things that are going to be really useful for your project 6.3. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about some texture filters, some things that add a little bit of grain, a little bit of grit, a little bit of visual interest to your pieces. And we're going to combine the pen tool, the gradient tool, and the value textures that are the texture tools that I show you tomorrow after break into our final version of 6.3. That make sense? Cool. So mess around with the gradient tools a little bit. Same way that we messed around with the pen tools. You can start creating some 3D sort of shapes such as these. You can see the gradient scales with the shape. If I make this really small, it's going to still have that same gradient, that still have that same distance. That's the magic of Illustrator. So there's your gradient tool. I want you to mess around with it a little bit today. Finish up 6.2 and 3, or 6.1 and 2, because those are due Friday. And this is I'll have a couple more resources that I find, as well as Mr. Hendricks's, posted in your thread. So you can see other ways that you can use the gradient tool. Cool. Thank y'all for listening. The rest of the time is yours to work on stuff. Please use it effectively.